In the high-stakes game of global trade, a new battlefront has just opened up, far from the usual flashpoints of tariffs and tech wars. This isn't about rare earth metals or semiconductors. This is a quiet, calculated move, a financial maneuver so audacious it could rewrite the rules of international commerce. For decades, we've watched China leverage its manufacturing might, its role as the world's factory. But now, Beijing is flipping the script. It's not about what they sell, it's about how they buy. And the first target in their sights is one of Australia's largest corporations. In a move that signals a direct challenge to the very foundation of global finance, the dominance of the US dollar. This is the story of how China is weaponizing its wallet, turning its massive import appetite into a tool of economic pressure and forcing its partners into a corner where they have to choose between their biggest customer and the world's reserve currency. For years, the world has been on edge, anticipating the moment China might pull its rare earth weapon, cutting off the supply of critical minerals essential for everything from iPhones to F-35 fighter jets. But while everyone was watching the export door, Beijing was quietly forging a new kind of weapon, one aimed not at supply, but at demand. The strategy is now unfolding in the boardrooms of one of the planet's largest mining conglomerates, Australia's BHP Billiton. In a stunning display of economic power, Beijing has reportedly issued a bold demand that BHP accept a significant portion of its payments, 30% of its revenue from Chinese sales in China's own currency, the yuan, instead of the globally accepted US dollar. This isn't a simple request for a currency swap. It's a strategic power play designed to reshape the flow of money and influence across the globe. Let's break down just how radical this move is. In almost every major international commodity transaction, the power dynamic is clear. The seller, who controls the valuable resource, dictates the terms. They hold the leverage. If you want their oil, their iron, or their grain, you play by their rules, and almost universally. That means you pay in US dollars. But here, China has inverted that logic. By leveraging its status as the world's largest consumer of raw materials, China is asserting that the buyer can be the one to call the shots. The customer is always right has been elevated from a retail slogan to a geopolitical doctrine. China is making its partners financially dependent, not just on its purchases, but on its currency. For a company like BHP, this demand creates an immediate and severe dilemma. They can't simply take the yuan and deposit it in the bank. Their operational costs, paying salaries, buying equipment, funding new mining projects are almost exclusively priced in US and Australian dollars. Accepting billions in yuan would expose them to immense financial risks, including the volatility of exchange rate fluctuations. More critically, it would tie their financial health to a currency whose value is tightly controlled by the People's Bank of China, making the process of converting that yuan back into usable dollars a potential nightmare subject to the whims of Beijing's policymakers. To understand the gravity of this situation, you have to remember the unique role the US dollar plays in the world. It's more than just America's currency. It's the global cash, the default medium for international trade. It's the bedrock upon which the modern financial system was built. Now, that long-standing order is being directly challenged by China's aggressive payment strategy. This isn't just a minor skirmish. It's a calculated strike at the heart of America's economic power. What makes this tactic so potent is its asymmetry. When China threatens supply restrictions, as with rare earths, it often inflicts self-harm, damaging its own producers and reputation as a reliable supplier. But forcing partners to accept payment in yuan is a different beast entirely. It puts all the pressure on the other side. For companies like BHP, replacing a customer as colossal as China is virtually impossible. The sheer volume of iron ore and other commodities that China imports dwarfs that of any other nation. They are, in many ways, the only game in town. This leaves them with a stark choice: acquiesce to China's currency demands and overhaul their entire financial architecture, or risk losing their single largest market. This move against BHP isn't an isolated incident or a simple trade dispute. It's a key piece in a much grander long-term strategic puzzle: the de-dollarization of the global economy. For Beijing, this is about systematically chipping away at the world's dependence on the US dollar, while simultaneously elevating the yuan and building a parallel financial ecosystem immune to American influence. To grasp the stakes, we need to rewind to the end of World War II. it was then. At the Bretton Woods Conference that the US dollar was anointed as the world's primary reserve currency. It became the common language of global trade, a decision that bestowed upon the United States what former French Finance Minister Valéry Giscard d'Estaing famously called an exorbitant privilege. This privilege allows the U.S. to buy goods from abroad with currency it can print, and it gives Washington incredible leverage through its control over the global financial plumbing. But this dominance is also a potential vulnerability. If the world finds another language to speak, that privilege could vanish. For China, this is fundamentally a game of monetary power and national security. The leadership in Beijing has watched with alarm as the United States has increasingly used its control over the dollar-based financial system as a tool of foreign policy, imposing sanctions and cutting off access to the SWIFT international payment network for countries like Russia and Iran. The unspoken fear in China is that they could be next. If a major geopolitical crisis erupted, perhaps over Taiwan, the U.S. could potentially lock China out of the global financial system, crippling its ability to trade and function. Building a yuan-centric alternative isn't just about ambition. It's about survival. It's a defensive strategy to create a financial fortress that can withstand potential American sanctions. While commentators have long focused on China's role as a producer and seller, they are now flexing a different muscle. By using their immense weight as the world's top importer of basic commodities from iron ore and copper to crude oil and soybeans, they are creating a powerful organic demand for the renminbi far beyond their own borders. Here's how it's designed to work in practice. Once a company like BHP receives massive payments in yuan, it can't just let that cash sit idle. It has to do something with it. It could use it to buy Chinese goods and services, perhaps machinery or equipment for their mining operations. They could reinvest it back into China, funding joint ventures or other projects. Or they could try to sell it on the open market to convert it back into dollars or other currencies. Each of these actions helps to weave the yuan more deeply into the fabric of the global economy. It creates a new cycle for the renminbi, where it flows out of China to pay for imports and then flows back in through trade or investment. This process increases the yuan's circulation and utility, making it a more attractive currency for other international players to hold and use. In parallel with these corporate pressures, China is actively pursuing government-to-government agreements to settle trade in their local currencies, bypassing the dollar entirely, signing deals with Russia, Brazil, Saudi Arabia, and dozens of other nations. At the same time, it's aggressively developing its own cross-border interbank payment system, SIPS, as a direct alternative to the Western-dominated SWIFT. These are not just isolated initiatives, they're coordinated, deliberate steps toward building a new international financial architecture with China at its center. What we are witnessing is a fundamental shift in China's global identity. It is transitioning from being a mere participant in the global economy to a powerful rulemaker. For half a century, the world traded according to a set of rules, largely written and enforced by the United States. China played that game, and played it brilliantly, using it to fuel the greatest economic expansion in human history. But now, they are no longer content to just play the game. They are starting to change the rules themselves. The demand placed on BHP Billiton is more than a commercial negotiation. It's a declaration of intent. China is signaling that it will use every tool at its disposal, including its massive purchasing power, to challenge the status quo and forge a new global order. This is not just a story about Australia, a mining company, or a currency dispute. It's about the dawn of a new era in the global power struggle. One that will be fought not with aircraft carriers and missiles, but with currencies, payment systems, and the undeniable might of the world's biggest buyer. The dollar's reign is not over, but for the first time in generations. It faces a challenger with the power, the strategy, and the will to build a world in its own image.